Applause thundered through the hall like shattering glass. The orchestra swelled, cameras flashed, and Charlotte Whitmore glided forward on her father's arm, smiling as if nothing in the world could ever touch her. The lace gown shimmered under the chandelier light, a family heirloom setting the stage for a picture-perfect wedding. In the shadows, balancing a tray of champagne flutes, Amara Johnson kept her steps steady. She wasn't there for luxury. She was there because rent was due, because her grandmother's medicine wasn't cheap, because double shifts meant survival. Not all smiles in the crowd were genuine. Some eyes carried daggers. Whispered voices slithered between pearls and tuxedos. Don't let that girl touch the cake. Watch the silverware. Prejudice wore fine jewelry that night. It dressed in silk, whispered softly, but wounded deeply. At the center of the room, as Charlotte turned to accept another round of applause, something glimmered on her wrist. A gold bracelet, delicate, engraved with tiny leaves. The shine was sharp, familiar. Amara's heart skipped. That piece wasn't just beautiful. It was haunting. Her grandmother's voice returned in a whisper. God never abandons the just. The night was only beginning, and justice sometimes chooses the most unlikely places to appear. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. The jazz band played softly, champagne glasses clinked, and Savannah's high society gathered for the wedding of the year. The Whitmore estate had been transformed into a fairy tale scene. Ivy climbing the walls, white roses everywhere, tables dressed in linen. Perfection was demanded, money guaranteed it. Charlotte entered with her carefully practiced smile. Bridesmaids marched in identical gowns, and someone whispered, "She's the very picture of elegance and virtue." Status worked like armor. Who would ever dare question it? Her groom, Daniel Reed, came from a different world. Middle class, raised by a single mother who had passed too soon. Unlike the Whitmores, he treated everyone with genuine kindness. He thanked the waiters, carried a bottle for the photographer, offered water to a tired musician. Humanity came naturally to him, and people could feel it. Behind the scenes, the staff hurried. "Amara, tray number 3, main table," barked the coordinator. The young woman tightened her apron, fixed her hair, and lifted the heavy silver tray. Tonight would be long. The polished marble floors were slippery. One mistake could cost her more than her job. As she passed through the glittering crowd, the whispers came again. "Hope she doesn't spill it on Charlotte's gown. These girls never learn." Amara kept her face calm. Silence had always been her shield. But then, the light struck Charlotte's wrist again. The bracelet gleamed, pulling Amara's mind backward like a hand dragging her into old wounds. Years ago, a bracelet just like that had vanished from the house where her mother worked. The family had accused her. The police had come. The word thief stuck to their name like tar. Her mother never recovered. Their family's life had unraveled, and now here it was, shining on the bride's arm. Daniel noticed Amara's shaken hands. He stepped forward, kindly taking a glass from her tray. "Thank you. Everything looks wonderful tonight." 3 simple words, enough to remind her she was seen, not invisible. "Thank you, Mr. Reed. Daniel's fine." He smiled, unaware of the storm gathering around him. The first dance began. The orchestra swelled, Charlotte twirled, and the bracelet flashed once more, blinding. Amara's breath caught. She remembered it clearly now. The bracelet bore an engraving on the inside, with 2 initials and a date. If she could just confirm it, there would be no doubt. The dance ended with roaring applause. Charlotte glowed like royalty. Daniel smiled like a man in love, and Amara trembled like someone staring at the past wrapped around the bride's wrist. Her co-worker, Luis, noticed. "Take a break, Amara, have some water." She sipped, her eyes locked on the bracelet. "Luis, do you see that bracelet?" "I see it. I need to know something. Don't get mixed up with people like them. Sometimes God puts you in the middle of it for a reason." The coordinator clapped her hands sharply. "Back to work. Dinner service now." That meant Amara would have to pass right beside the main table, close enough to see, close enough to know. The crowd celebrated a flawless love story, but Amara knew some fortunes are built on stolen pain, and when the truth begins to glimmer like gold, silence can no longer hold. That night, she felt it. Something stronger than fear walked beside her. It had no face, but it had purpose. And it whispered with her grandmother's voice, "Justice may take its time, but it always arrives." While the bride basked in admiration, Amara slipped quietly between tables, her tray steady, but her heart unquiet. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the orchestral melodies, all of it formed a wall that seemed to separate her from everyone else. She wasn't part of the celebration. She was part of the furniture. To the wealthy, people like her were invisible. She moved swiftly, almost silently, setting glasses, replacing plates, offering polite nods. No one looked her in the eye. No one said, "Thank you." Except Daniel. Always Daniel. At one table, a group of wealthy women fanned themselves dramatically. Their jewelry glittered as they gossiped, their voices hushed but sharp enough to pierce. "She looks nervous, doesn't she?" "Careful, dear. The Whitmores don't tolerate mistakes." Their eyes slid toward Amara as if she were a child sneaking where she didn't belong. She lowered her gaze, focused on the tray, but every word pressed heavy on her chest. Across the room, Charlotte laughed with her bridesmaids. Her father stood proudly near the mayor, speaking of family legacy, wealth, and tradition. Words that meant power, words that reminded Amara of the divide between their worlds. The staff corridor smelled of food and sweat. In the kitchen, the other waiters hustled. Louise caught her eye. "Keep your head down, Amara. It's one night. Collect your pay and go home." She nodded, but the image of that bracelet still burned inside her mind. Returning to the hall, she paused near the grand staircase. On the wall hung portraits of the Whitmore ancestors, stern faces, pale skin, framed in gold. The family's history stared down like judges in a courtroom. Amara felt the weight of centuries pressing on her. As she adjusted her tray, a guest brushed past her roughly. "Watch it, girl," he muttered without looking. Her jaw tightened. She wanted to answer, but silence was safer. She swallowed the humiliation, just as she had done countless times before. Then, as she stepped closer to the main table, her eyes locked on Charlotte's wrist again. The bracelet glimmered under the lights, mocking her with every movement. The memory grew sharper, her mother weeping on the front steps, pleading her innocence, while the employer's cold voice accused her. "A thief in my home, I should have known." The shame of that night had never left their family. Neighbors whispered, opportunities vanished. Her mother's health had declined, her spirit crushed. And now the very object that destroyed them gleamed proudly on Charlotte Whitmore's arm, celebrated as part of her bridal beauty. A storm churned inside Amara. She felt unseen, unheard, and yet she knew something no one else in that room dared to imagine. As Daniel rose from his seat to greet an old friend, his eyes fell on Amara again. This time he noticed more than her tray. He noticed the sorrow in her eyes, the hesitation in her steps. For a brief moment, their gazes met. And Amara thought, if only someone here believed me. But the music swelled again, and the applause rose. Charlotte twirled, her veil floating like wings. The world cheered for her, and Amara disappeared back into the shadows, carrying the weight of a truth that no one was ready to hear. Invisible, yet holding a secret that could shatter the night. The dinner service began. The grand hall of the Whitmore estate glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. Waiters weaved through the tables with trays of roasted lamb, asparagus, and wine older than most of the guests. Every detail screamed luxury. Every detail reminded Amara that she didn't belong. Her tray trembled slightly as she approached the table nearest the dance floor. A woman in a satin gown glanced at her hands and whispered behind her fan, "Don't spill it. Not on this dress." The comment wasn't meant to be loud, but it was meant to be heard. Another guest chuckled softly, eyes scanning Amara as if she were a child playing dress-up in a world too fine for her. She set down the plates without a word, but inside, her chest tightened. It wasn't the first time she'd felt it, that sting of judgment wrapped in politeness. The way eyes slid over her skin, quick but sharp, as if she were less. She moved to the next table, only to hear another murmur. Richard Whitmore spares no expense, does he? Even the staff is, well, let's say diverse. A round of low laughter followed. Amara's throat burned. She wanted to defend herself, to speak the truth of her worth, her hard work, her dignity. But silence was survival. Silence was rent, medicine, and food on the table. From across the room, she spotted Daniel again. He was listening politely to one of Charlotte's uncles, but his gaze flickered toward Amara. He saw the way the guests brushed past her, dismissing her presence as if she were invisible. He saw the way she swallowed words no one else cared to hear. But then Charlotte laughed, leaning into him, and his attention was pulled back to his bride. At the main table, Charlotte basked in admiration. Compliments poured like wine. Her beauty, her poise, her family's legacy. The Whitmores wore pride like armor, smiling with the certainty that this marriage was the crown jewel of their name. Yet Amara couldn't take her eyes off the bride's wrist. The bracelet flashed again, each shimmer like a dagger. She remembered the engraved letters inside. She remembered the date. She remembered her mother's tears when the police searched their small home and found nothing. Nothing, because they were innocent. But the accusation had already ruined them. A group of young groomsmen passed near her, laughing loudly. One of them accidentally bumped her shoulder, making the tray wobble. "Careful, sweetheart," he said with a smirk. The others laughed as Amara steadied the glasses. Her heart pounded, but her face stayed still. She refused to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. She carried the tray back to the kitchen. The noise of the hall faded behind her, replaced by the clatter of dishes and the shouts of chefs. Louise noticed her trembling hands. "They don't see us, Amara. We're shadows to them. Don't let their words stick." She forced a smile, but her voice was low. "Sometimes, shadows carry the truth." Louise frowned, confused, but she said no more. When she returned to the hall, Charlotte was on the dance floor again, veils swirling, bracelet gleaming. Every laugh, every compliment, every cheer felt like salt on a wound. The night was built to celebrate perfection, but Amara knew. Perfection was a mask, and masks always crack. She held her tray tighter, whispering in her heart, "Lord, give me strength." The looks that hurt would not break her, not tonight. Because tonight she carried more than drinks. She carried a truth waiting to explode. The Whitmore estate shimmered like a palace that night. Every corner spoke of money, crystal vases filled with orchids, polished silver that reflected candlelight, waiters gliding with trays as if choreographed. To the outside eye, the Whitmores represented elegance, tradition, and success. But those who had worked for them long enough knew better. Richard Whitmore, the patriarch, stood near the head table, his voice booming as he spoke to the mayor and a group of investors. "Our family has always carried Savannah's name with pride. The Whitmores invest, we preserve history, we create opportunity." The words dripped with grandeur, but Amara heard something else. The tone of a man used to controlling every narrative. He wasn't just proud. He was rehearsed, polished, calculated. She slipped past him, pouring wine, her ears catching whispers that never reached the stage. "Richard looks confident tonight," one guest muttered. "Well, he has to. After what happened with the foundation money," another replied, before quickly changing the subject. Amara's steps faltered. Foundation money. The words echoed, but no one else seemed to notice. Charlotte, meanwhile, played the perfect bride. Her laughter rang like bells, her movements graceful. She kissed her father's cheek, held Daniel's hand, charmed the cameras. To anyone watching, she was flawless. But when Amara passed closer, tray in hand, she caught the sharp edge of Charlotte's smile. A flicker, a shadow in her eyes, quickly hidden. It wasn't joy. It was something colder. At the staff station, Luis leaned against the wall, shaking his head. They wear masks, Amara. Masks of silk and pearls. Behind them, just people like everyone else. Sometimes worse. Amara swallowed hard, whispering back, "Sometimes those masks hide stolen things." Luis looked at her sharply, but she turned away before he could ask. Later, as speeches began, Charlotte's mother, Eleanor Whitmore, rose with a glass of champagne. "Tonight we celebrate not just love but legacy. Our daughter's marriage unites families, traditions, and futures. The Whitmore name will continue to shine." The guests applauded. Cameras flashed. But Amara felt her stomach twist. Legacy. That word. Legacy built on accusations, on pain her own family had carried for years. As Charlotte raised her hand to wave, the bracelet gleamed again, catching the light. The mask of perfection glowed with it. Amara whispered under her breath, "But masks don't last forever." In that moment, Daniel glanced at his bride. His smile was warm, but his eyes carried a question, like he too sensed something behind her polished mask. The hall erupted into another round of laughter, the illusion intact. But Amara knew the truth. Behind every mask there is a crack, and tonight the cracks were beginning to show. The night pressed forward, each toast louder, each laugh more forced. The champagne flowed like water, but Amara's throat was dry. She kept her eyes down, her tray steady, but her heart was restless. Every time she caught a glimpse of Charlotte's bracelet, her chest tightened. It wasn't just a memory anymore, it was a wound reopening. Near the dance floor, Amara bent to collect empty glasses from a low table. As she rose, her path collided with Charlotte's. The bride had stepped away from her guests for just a moment, her veil brushing the polished floor. She turned sharply, and for the first time that evening, her eyes met Amara's. It was only a few seconds, but it was enough. Charlotte's smile froze. The laughter in her throat faltered, and Amara, for a heartbeat, thought she saw something flicker in those perfect green eyes. Recognition. Not the casual glance of a stranger, not the disdainful look of someone glancing at the help. Recognition. Charlotte's hand instinctively brushed the bracelet, as if guarding it. The orchestra played louder. Guests clapped as another couple joined the dance floor. But between the bride and the waitress, silence grew heavier than sound. Amara's pulse pounded. She knows. She knows I see it. Charlotte tilted her chin, regaining her perfect smile. "Careful, sweetheart," she said softly, just loud enough for Amara to hear. "Wouldn't want you to trip in front of all these people." The words dripped with sugar, but the sting beneath them was sharp. It wasn't concern. It was warning. Amara's lips pressed into a line. She gave a polite nod, but her eyes didn't lower this time. She held Charlotte's gaze, steady, unflinching. For a moment, the mask slipped. Charlotte's smile thinned. Her grip on Daniel's arm tightened as he returned to her side. Daniel, oblivious, kissed her cheek and whispered something that made her laugh again. But Amara saw it, the tension, the fear. When Charlotte turned back to her guests, her laughter was too bright, too polished. The mask was back, but Amara knew. Behind it, the bride was shaken. Back in the service corridor, Luis noticed her pale face. "What happened?" Amara set the tray down, her hands trembling. "She saw me. She knows I know." Luis frowned. "Knows what?" Amara hesitated. The words felt dangerous, like fire on her tongue. "That bracelet, it's not hers." Luis stared at her, confused and worried. But Amara's eyes burned with certainty. The encounter had not been chance. It was a collision of past and present, of lies and truth. And in that single exchange of glances, Amara realized something powerful. Charlotte Whitmore was afraid of her. The night's rhythm continued, polished and grand. Guests raised glasses to the newlyweds. Musicians played as if each note were made of gold, and the Whitmore estate glowed like a kingdom untouched by time. But behind the swinging doors of the kitchen, the world was different. Steam rose from pans, Dishes clattered, cooks shouted, and waiters hurried back and forth. The glamour stopped at the doorframe. Back here, it was sweat and exhaustion. Amara set her tray down, breathing heavily. Her hands still tingled from the brief encounter with Charlotte. She poured herself a glass of water, but her mind was racing. She knows I recognized it. Luis noticed her pale face. You're shaking again. Want me to cover for you? Amara shook her head. No. I need to hear something. Something's not right. She grabbed another tray and stepped back toward the hall. But before she could push the door open, voices floated in. The heavy oak door didn't close properly, leaving a crack wide enough for sound to slip through. She froze. It was Charlotte's voice. Low. Urgent. You promised me no one would notice. Amara pressed closer to the door. Her breath caught in her chest. Then came Eleanor Whitmore, the bride's mother, her tone colder, controlled. Keep your composure. No one will question you. That bracelet has been on your wrist for years now. Only you and I know the truth. Amara's heart hammered. Charlotte hissed. What if someone remembers? What if... She remembers. A pause. Eleanor's reply was sharp as a blade. Then you make sure she stays silent. Do you understand? The Whitmore name will not be stained tonight. Amara's stomach turned. Every suspicion, every memory, it was true. The bracelet wasn't theirs. It had been stolen. And Charlotte feared exposure. She stepped back, almost stumbling into a stack of dishes. Luis caught her arm just in time. Amara, what's wrong? Her voice trembled. I heard them. Luis, it's real. That bracelet, it belonged to my mother's employer. They accused her of stealing it. They ruined her. And now it's right there on Charlotte's wrist. Luis's eyes widened, torn between fear and anger. You can't say that here, they'll crush you. I don't care. Her voice was firm now, burning with quiet fire. God brought me here tonight for a reason. I can't stay silent anymore. Beyond the door, applause thundered as another toast was made. Laughter spilled into the kitchen like a cruel reminder of how easily lies could be celebrated. But Amara no longer felt invisible. She felt chosen. Her grandmother's words whispered again. Justice may take its time, but it always arrives. And tonight, Amara knew it was her turn to speak. The ballroom glittered brighter as the night deepened. The orchestra shifted into a slower tune, the kind that pulled couples to the dance floor. Guests swayed in elegance, champagne glasses clinked, and the world seemed wrapped in perfection. But Amara's eyes were fixed only on one thing: the bracelet. It gleamed each time Charlotte lifted her hand, each time she brushed back her veil or waved at the guests. Every sparkle was a reminder, every flash a wound reopened. Amara knew there was only one way to silence the doubt in her heart. She had to see the inside of that bracelet, the engraving, the initials, the date. It was the proof her family had been innocent all along. She carried a tray closer to the head table. Her hands were steady now, not because she wasn't afraid, but because fear had been replaced by resolve. Charlotte laughed with her bridesmaids, lifting her arm gracefully as if the world belonged to her. For a brief second, the bracelet slid down her wrist, catching the light. Amara leaned in, eyes sharp, breath held. She saw it, the faint etching, nearly hidden in the curve of gold. LJ, 1987. Her chest tightened, her knees nearly gave way. It was real. Exactly as her mother had described the day she swore through tears that she had never stolen it. The world blurred for a moment. Laughter, music, applause, it all faded. Amara was standing not just in the ballroom but in the memory of her mother, broken and humiliated, accused of a theft she didn't commit. And now, the truth glittered on Charlotte Whitmore's arm for all to see. Charlotte suddenly looked up. Their eyes met again. For the second time that night, Charlotte froze. She followed Amara's gaze down to her own wrist, and quickly covered the bracelet with her other hand. A thin smile returned to Charlotte's lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her jaw tightened. She knew. She knew Amara had seen. Amara stepped back, Trey trembling slightly. Luis caught her eye from across the room, silently urging her to calm down. But she shook her head. Calm wasn't possible anymore. Daniel, unaware of the storm brewing, raised his glass to toast. His voice was warm, honest, full of hope. To my wife, the love of my life and the family I am proud to join. The hall erupted with applause. But in the silence of her soul, Amara whispered, "You don't know the truth, Daniel, not yet." As the cheer died down, Charlotte's mother leaned toward her daughter, whispering something sharp into her ear. Charlotte nodded stiffly. Her fingers clutched tight around the bracelet. The mask of perfection was cracking, and Amara was ready. She closed her eyes for a brief second, whispering a prayer. "Lord, give me strength, not for revenge, but for truth." When she opened them again, her fear was gone. All that remained was determination. The secret had shown. She had seen it. The question was no longer if the truth would come out, but when. And Amara was ready to be the voice her mother never had. The ballroom sparkled, but for Amara the lights burned too brightly. Every laugh, every clink of glass, every smile felt like a mockery. She had seen the engraving. She had no doubt anymore. The bracelet was proof. Proof that her mother had been innocent. Proof that the Whitmores had built their legacy on lies. But what was she supposed to do with that truth? Her breath grew shallow as she stood near the kitchen doors, tray pressed against her chest. She could hear her grandmother's voice in her mind, the same words that had carried her through every trial. God doesn't abandon the just. And then another voice came, the memory of her mother, whispering on the night everything had been taken from them. Never let them silence you, Amara. Never. Her eyes filled with tears, not of fear, of clarity. The music slowed as the band prepared for another announcement. Daniel tapped his glass, smiling at the crowd. "My friends, my family, if I may have your attention one more time." The room quieted. All eyes turned to the groom. Amara's heart pounded. This was her chance. If she stayed silent now, she would never forgive herself. Her steps felt heavier than stone as she moved forward, tray still in her hands. Each click of her shoes on the polished floor echoed louder than the orchestra. She reached the edge of the main table. Her voice trembled at first, but she forced it out. "Excuse me, may I say something?" The room froze. Heads turned. 100 pairs of eyes locked on her. Some widened in shock, others narrowed in annoyance. A waitress speaking during the reception? It was unthinkable. Charlotte's smile faltered. Eleanor Whitmore's fingers tightened around her glass. Amara swallowed hard, her throat dry, but she didn't back down. "I know this is a celebration. I know I'm not supposed to speak, but there's something you should all hear." Whispers rippled through the hall. Guests leaned closer, curiosity sparking. Charlotte rose slightly from her chair, her voice sharp and cold. "Miss, I think you've mistaken your place. Please return to the kitchen." Amara's chest ached, but she stood her ground. "With respect, Mrs. Whitmore, my place tonight is right here, because what I have to say concerns this family. And that bracelet on your wrist." Gasps echoed through the hall. Daniel's eyes darted to his bride's arm. Charlotte's face paled, though her smile stayed frozen. "This is ridiculous." "Sit down, girl." Amara's voice grew stronger, fueled by every humiliation she had endured, every injustice her family had carried. "That bracelet doesn't belong to you. It belonged to the Lawson family. My mother worked for them, and when it disappeared, they accused her of stealing it. They ruined her name. They ruined our lives." A stunned silence fell over the hall. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Some gasped, others whispered, but all eyes were fixed on Charlotte. Amara lifted her chin, tears streaming, but her voice steady now. "But my mother never stole anything. And tonight I saw the truth with my own eyes. The engraving inside that bracelet, LJ, 1987. I recognized it instantly. That bracelet was never yours. It was taken, and for years my family carried the shame of your lies." A murmur spread like wildfire. The room buzzed with disbelief, shock, and outrage. Charlotte stood fully now, her face flushed, her voice sharp with panic. "How dare you? This is our wedding, and you—" But Daniel interrupted, his voice rising. "Charlotte, is it true?" The question cut through the hall like a blade. Charlotte's lips trembled. She clutched the bracelet tightly, as if hiding it could erase the truth. Eleanor Whitmore rose as well, trying to take control. "This is an absurd accusation. This girl is just a waitress. Who would believe her?" But Daniel's eyes stayed locked on his bride. And the silence that followed was more damning than any words. Amara's hand shook as she whispered the last line, not just to the guests, but to the heavens above. "God sees everything, and tonight, so do all of you." The ballroom erupted, voices rising, questions flying, the perfect facade crumbling. For the first time all night, Charlotte Whitmore's mask shattered. The ballroom, once glowing with elegance, now trembled under a storm of whispers. Guests leaned across tables, hands covering mouths, eyes darting between Charlotte and Amara. The music had stopped. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. Charlotte stood frozen, her hand clutching the bracelet as if it were a lifeline. Her perfect smile was gone. Her mask had cracked. Daniel's voice broke the silence. Strong, steady, but heavy with disbelief. "Charlotte, tell me it isn't true." Charlotte's lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes flickered to her mother, desperate. Eleanor Whitmore stepped forward, her tone sharp and commanding, as though authority alone could erase the truth. "Enough of this nonsense. This girl is making wild accusations to embarrass us. She will be escorted out at once." But the guests weren't convinced. The murmur grew louder, confusion turning into suspicion. Several leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the bracelet. An older woman in the crowd gasped. "I know that piece. It belonged to the Lawsons, didn't it?" The words spread like fire. The Lawsons. The missing bracelet. The story resurfaced. An old scandal no one had dared to speak of, but everyone remembered. Daniel turned back to Charlotte, his voice shaking now. "Answer me. Where did you get that bracelet?" Charlotte's hand trembled as she tried to hide it behind her dress. It was a gift." Amara stepped forward, her voice clear, unwavering. "A gift? Then show them. Show everyone the inside." Gasps rippled through the hall. All eyes locked on the bride. Charlotte froze. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Eleanor hissed into her ear, "Don't you dare." But Daniel reached out, gently but firmly, taking her wrist. His fingers turned the bracelet over. His eyes fell on the engraving, those tiny letters, etched decades ago. LJ, 1987. His face paled. He looked at Amara, then back at Charlotte, betrayal filling his eyes. "It's true," he whispered. The room erupted. Voices shouted over one another. They lied all these years. That poor woman accused for nothing. The Whitmores covered it up. Charlotte's composure shattered. Tears blurred her makeup, her body trembling under the weight of exposure. I didn't know what else to do. It was already in our house. Father said, we couldn't. But her words fell apart, drowned in the outrage of the guests. Eleanor tried to shout over the chaos, but her voice no longer held power. The mayor turned his back. Investors whispered angrily. Their allies shifted away, leaving them stranded in the center of a crumbling empire. Daniel dropped her wrist as though it burned him. All this time, all the speeches about honor, about legacy, and it was built on lies, on someone else's suffering. His voice broke, not with anger alone, but with heartbreak. Charlotte reached for him, pleading, "Daniel, please." But he stepped back, his face cold, his decision clear. Meanwhile, Amara stood in silence. She didn't need to say another word. The truth had spoken louder than anything she could have imagined. Luis appeared at her side, whispering, "Amara, you did it. They can't hide anymore." For the first time in years, Amara felt the weight lift from her shoulders. Her mother's name had been restored. The Whitmores had been unmasked. Before everyone. And the wedding that was meant to crown their legacy had instead torn it apart. The ballroom, once a stage of perfection, had turned into a courtroom. No judge, no jury, just truth. Charlotte sobbed, her hands trembling as she clutched the bracelet. Eleanor's sharp voice cracked, trying to salvage dignity. This is all a misunderstanding. The Whitmores remain a pillar of Savannah society. But the words no longer carried weight. Guests turned their backs. Allies whispered of scandal. The mayor quietly slipped out the side door. The empire the Whitmores had spent generations building crumbled in minutes. Daniel stood in silence, his face pale, his jaw tight. He looked at his bride, the woman he had thought he loved, and saw not beauty, not grace, but betrayal. Charlotte, I could forgive almost anything, but not this. Not lies that destroyed another family. Charlotte reached for him, desperate. Please, Daniel, I did it for us, for the family. But he pulled away, shaking his head. No, you did it for yourself. For pride. For the mask you wear. Her cries echoed, but Daniel stepped back, his choice clear. The marriage was broken before it had even begun. The crowd parted as Amara stood tall, her eyes shining with tears she refused to hide. For once the eyes of Savannah were not on the Whitmores, but on her. The invisible waitress had become the voice of truth. Luis whispered softly, almost in awe. They see you now, Amara. She took a breath, her voice carrying through the hall, steady and strong. My mother lived years under shame she never deserved. Tonight the truth has been revealed. Not by me, but by God. He does not abandon the just. Justice may take time, but it always comes. The room fell silent. For the first time all night, every guest bowed their head, not out of respect for the Whitmores, but for the young woman who had stood against them. Daniel approached her slowly. His eyes, though broken by betrayal, softened as he looked at Amara. Your mother's name will be restored. I'll make sure everyone knows what really happened. The world will hear the truth, Amara. Tears welled in her eyes. She nodded, whispering, Thank you. That's all I ever wanted. Charlotte collapsed into a chair, face buried in her hands. Eleanor stood rigid, but her power was gone. No amount of money, no polished speech, no family name could silence the truth that had been shouted tonight. And outside, as the night air cooled the estate, Amara stepped onto the porch, breathing freely for the first time in years. The stars above glittered like witnesses to a divine verdict. Her grandmother's words echoed once more. Justice may take its time, child, but it never fails. Amara lifted her face to the heavens, whispering, She can rest now. Mama can rest. The wedding that was meant to crown the Whitmores had instead exposed them. The arrogant were humbled, the oppressed lifted, and truth at last had spoken. Justice had arrived. Have you ever witnessed injustice finally being revealed? Share your story in the comments. Do you believe, like Amara's grandmother said, that justice may take time but always arrives? Write below. Never lose hope. The proud may rise, but the truth always shines. God never abandons the just.